Good morning, Dawn. How are you doing today?
Doing well.
I'm
Good to
looking
see you.
forward. Yeah, nice to see you. I'm looking forward to having a nice chat with you for the next few minutes, telling us all about your family and the past and the present and the future, etc. So why don't we start just talking about your family growing up, and let's go on from there.
Okay, well, we started out, and I was born just as World War II was starting. And my mom was 19 years old when I was born, immature. And then my dad joined the Army and left. And she never forgave him for leaving her. So, but then after the war, we moved out to Multnomah in a converted chicken house. The bathroom and toilet and shower were on the back porch. And then in 1952, Uncle Ralph came down, and he and my dad and another guy rebuilt the house. So
Great. Can you tell us a little bit about your parents growing, their past, like your mother was from where?
well, she was born in Halfway, Oregon, which is over in Eastern Oregon. Mm-hmm. And she was number 8 of 8 kids.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And number 6, her brother Richard or Dick, they called him Dick, was killed in the war.
Oh, wow.
In 1942. So, but they moved around a lot. My grandfather was a music teacher and ended up teaching at Portland State University.
That was your grandfather on your mother's side.
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
And all my mom's brothers all played, during the 30s, played instruments, had bands and stuff. So it was pretty a musical family.
And what about you?
And then I played the trumpet in high school. And we had this awesome teacher, and we played really great music.
Oh, wow.
Victory at Sea, Nutcracker Suite, all kinds of Oklahoma. It was fun. That was the best part of my high school.
That sounds good. And now, how about your father? Now, he was raised, I think you were raised on a farm, and because your heritage is farming on your father's side, right?
Right. We bought this place after the war in 1946. It has a half acre, and we raised chickens and ducks and rabbits, and then had a big garden. And my folks didn't have much money. That's pretty much what we ate. Whatever we grew. I don't remember much red meat. and then my dad would go to the war surplus and get K rations or C rations from the war. We'd bring them home and eat those.
Tell us something about your father and his experience in the war. You have some pictures behind you there I see on the wall. You want to tell us something about those?
Yeah, he was in for 3 years, but the first 2 years were training in the States. And then in 1944, in September 44, his division landed in Omaha Beach and joined the Third Army with General Patton. And my dad was a surveyor for the field artillery and had his own Jeep with a surveying equipment built into it. And so he said he had a pretty good time. He spent most of the time driving the captain around. Dad was 30 and the captain was 21. So.
And that chart that you have behind you, you were telling me something about that earlier. Your stepson, I think, gave you put together this chart.
Yeah, Jason put this together. If I can get out of the way. Has a map of where he was in Germany and the 4 different campaigns he was in.
Wow.
And then he was in the Third Army, and then for a while the Ninth Army, and they got awards for all their service. And he wrote on the backside right here, I don't know if you can see it, right there where my shoulder is, the story of his time. And it's funny because the first 2, he talks about being in the States, and the last is the only one that talks about being in the war.
Wow, interesting.
But he came back, he had a 30-day leave, and then the 95th Division was scheduled to go to Japan for the invasion. But just before they were going to sail, Japan surrendered.
Oh, wow.
In September.
Wow.
So he didn't have to go.
Wow. Wow.
Mhm.
So when he came back after the war, what happened? Did he get into a new career or what did he do?
Well, no, he just went back to his job at Engine 25 over in Southeast Portland
Mm-hmm.
and in the fire department. Because he joined the fire department in 1937. And then
Then he got
there was something
drafted.
else.
Did he get
Huh?
drafted? He got drafted for World War II, probably, right? Or
No, he didn't have to go.
oh,
He volunteered because
Oh.
he'd already been in the National Guard for 9 years,
Hmm.
and he was older, and he was a Portland firefighter, so he wouldn't have had to go. And
Oh.
that's why my mom was mad at him.
Wow.
So he left.
Huh.
But we had before, when they got married, they bought a brand new house in Southeast Portland. And then my grandfather, her father, had a stroke. So after Dad went in the service, Grandma and Grandpa moved in with us, and then my Aunt Margaret, the next oldest sister, came and took care of us. Her husband was over in the Pacific. He was a Marine.
Hmm.
And so she worked and took care of all of us there for a while. And then just down the street, 2 or 3 blocks down the street, was a rental house where Aunt Vera lived with Barbara and Carol and our Aunt Eleanor and Grandma Millie.
Those are all on the green side. It's all on the green
Yeah,
side.
I don't know where Grandpa Green was,
Mm-hmm.
but and then they lived there, and we didn't. I don't know. I've read some letters that mention the fact that they were there from both sides.
Mm-hmm.
But I think my mom was trying to give Aunt Vera a dog or something.
Yeah.
But and then Grandma Millie died in 1944. And actually, I don't know what happened to what happened to Vera and the girls after that, or Eleanor, for
Yeah.
that matter.
Now you haven't mentioned your sister Diana. Can you tell us a little bit about her?
Well, I don't know. There was not much to tell. She took care of my mom after she got. Oh no, that was before we started this. After high school, she worked for Viewmaster, and Viewmaster had lived out at the time. There's no public utilities, so they had a domestic well for drinking water, and they dumped all their chemicals on the ground. So the well was contaminated, and 25,000 people got contaminated with possible liver problems. And I think that's what my sister died from, was liver disease when she was 56. But anyway, in 1980, she quit her job and moved home to take care of my mom when she had diabetes. And in 1983, my mom had her leg amputated, but she had an electric wheelchair, and they lived on a horse farm and boarding stables, and there was high school girls that come out to learn how to ride, and my mom was in her electric wheelchair, and she'd go down the barn and teach the girls how to ride.
Oh, that's great.
So, yeah, it was pretty neat.
Yeah.
And then she died in 1988 at 65. So, and then my dad stayed there with Diana, and my dad stayed there until 94 when he passed away.
And what happened to the farm after that?
Well, we sold it. And we sold it on contract, private contract, and got monthly payments. And that's what my sister, that was her only income.
Oh, wow.
And so she lived from 94 to 03. She died in 03. She bought a condominium, small condominium, and lived in it the last 3 or 4 years. But
now, what I remember a lot from Diana is her love of researching and knowing a lot about the Green family.
Oh yeah,
it was unbelievable.
I have files.
And you inherited them.
There's still things I haven't discovered yet. It's pretty interesting. Every once in a while, I can start going through something, looking for something, and find something else I didn't know.
Wow. So what did she pass on to you? What is it that she was doing? Lots of letters, I guess, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, she just left him. I never continued
Uh-huh.
other than what we do here.
Uh-huh.
Um, but she corresponded with people from around the country
Uh-huh.
and on both sides of our family. So um, different. My cousin Betty Ray on the Mac side, she's married to a fellow named Jim Green who just passed away. And his great grandfather and our great grandfather came from the same county in New York.
Oh, wow.
And we always wondered if there was a connection, but never could find one.
Hmm.
So,
Interesting. Interesting. Now, the other couple pictures you have behind you, what are those pictures of? Who are they?
the
You're
one right, yeah,
just
right
behind
here
you,
is
yes. Mhm.
my dad, my mom, and myself. My dad's in his Army uniform, so it's
Hmm.
during the war, but it might be just after the war. I don't know, because it looked like because I was 3 when the war ended.
Huh.
That looks maybe there. And then the next picture over is myself. I made lieutenant in my previous life. I call it my previous life when I was married to Diane. And we had that picture taken. And then the last one was my dad in his fire department uniform, taken when he was 44 years old.
Uh-huh. So you said when you were a lieutenant, that was as a fireman, right?
Right. And I was a lieutenant, company officer. I was in charge of one fire company.
Mhm.
So, and as I got more seniority, then I was in charge of both companies in the station.
Mhm.
So
And then you retired. How long ago did you retire?
1993.
Mhm. And been having fun ever since, right?
Yeah, it's been great. I've done a lot of traveling. You know, we spent the summer out there on the East Coast, and you and Richard, and
Right. Yeah.
yeah. I always think of that motorcycle ride we went around on the east side of Chesapeake Bay.
Right. I remember.
Yeah, but there was some in my past. Well, we weren't going to talk about me yet.
Well, no,
My
let's talk about you. How about you? Tell us about your
oh
past. Mhm.
oh well. After high school, I joined the Air Force, and then when I was in tech school in Wichita Falls, Texas, Shepherd Air Force Base, I hitchhiked to Harold's Ranch on Thanksgiving weekend and spent 2 days with him down there. And then he offered me, he's trying to find one of his nephews that would come down and work with him on the ranch and work into the business.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, so when I got out in 1964, in the fall, I drove down there and I worked with him for about 2 weeks, and he figured out I was still needed a lot of education and needed more things to do what he wanted to do, and he was working on a project with your father, with Floyd.
Yes, I remember that. Mhm.
Yeah, and I'm not sure exactly. I've heard different things about it, but it was a laser system for leveling the land.
Right,
So I
right.
worked with him with that for about a week,
Mm.
trying to get, but I just didn't know enough. I didn't have enough education. He wanted me to go home and learn about electronics and
Oh, wow.
math and go to bodybuilding and stuff. So after 2 weeks, I went home, and then see, that was in '64. So when I decided I didn't want to go back, so I went in 1966. I got in the fire department and stayed there for 28 years.
Now you
My dad had
yeah,
hmm?
you skipped Vietnam. Tell us about Vietnam.
Oh, President Kennedy called me up and wanted me to, I don't know if I wanted to go temporary duty to Vietnam, because at that time it was just a temporary assignment. Anyway, I ended up as a maintenance crew chief on a C-123 cargo assault transport cargo plane. And we went out and landed out in the jungle strips, and we were mostly supplied the Green Beret Army Special Forces. And it was pretty exciting. You know, I was 20 years old. It was got to carry a gun sometimes. I didn't even know how to shoot.
And it was
And,
pretty safe over there during that time for you?
well, not really.
Oh,
One of my buddies and I rented motorcycles and went for a ride out in the country. And the next day, some Marines were ambushed out the same place we were at. So,
wow.
and they were. I spent a lot of time patching bullet holes in my airplane.
Wow.
So I wasn't a flight crew. I just I was a ground maintenance chief, crew chief, and but it was exciting. I go for just fly, go for rides and watch. When they were airdropping, we'd airdrop pigs and chickens and ducks and cows to the villagers, and they were all alive. We dropped them on parachutes.
Wow. So how do you drop a live pig?
They had woven baskets, and they shoved these little pigs into the basket head first,
Oh, wow.
and then tie about a dozen of them onto a parachute. And then the Vietnamese kickers, when we fly over, they throw them out the back of the plane. And the parachutes would come out on a static line.
Interesting.
It was pretty fun.
Huh.
And then we even dropped thatch, because the Green Berets were moving the people into compounds, and they're building new houses, and they used thatch for the roofs. So we'd airdrop all this thatch. And one of them got hung up going out of the plane and ended up going in the river.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was an interesting time. Yeah, one time when I was on, we got hit 6 times by ground fire. So
wow.
it was just before I was getting ready to go home, and I thought, I'm not on air crew. I'm not getting paid for this. Maybe I should stay on the ground.
Wow. So talk about Margie for a minute and your stepsons. That would be nice to hear about.
Yeah. Well, I met Margie on a blind date. She grew up in Scappoose. She'd been married to another much older guy, Roger. He was in World War II, actually, a tail gunner in a B-17. But she had the 2 boys, and she'd been divorced about 5 years. And we met on a blind date from a mutual friend that I worked with. I always had part-time jobs, and for 15 years I worked for an home heating oil company. And so then I got divorced, and the lady in the office, Betty, knew me real well. And so about a year and a half after I got divorced, she introduced me to Margie, or gave me Margie's phone number. And we went out on a blind date, and 4.5 months later, we got married.
Wow.
Yeah. But the boys were really into sports, and I was never into sports. So that was a big difference for both of us, for all of us. But they excelled there. Jason was the varsity quarterback at Tigard High School for 2 years and had a winning season both times. And Jeff was varsity quarterback 1 year, senior year, but he didn't have a winning season.
So how old were the boys when you got married?
Jason was 12 and Jeff was 6. And then the next year, Jeff rode his bicycle out in front of a car and got hit and was unconscious for 4 days.
Oh, wow.
And that was when it was pretty trying time, because the doctor said if he lived through that first night, he had a 50% chance of living.
Oh, wow.
And he had no chance that he'd ever be normal.
Wow.
So I called our practitioner, Mrs. Jones, and she took over. And 4 days later, he woke up, and he's been fine ever since.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Wow.
The hospital people called it a miracle.
Wow. Yeah, you've never mentioned Christian Science till just now. Where you were raised in it, right?
Right. Yeah, I went to Sunday school. And my first girlfriend, her mother was ran the Sunday school. And when I was a little kid, I thought she was Mary Baker Eddy.
Oh, no.
But Yeah, but I kind of fell off the wagon after.
How about the rest of your family? Were they, Diana, I think was a pretty good Christian Scientist, wasn't she?
Yeah, yeah. And my dad went to church. Used to go to church with my dad all the time, clear up until he passed away.
Really? Huh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But
yeah. Now, talk about the passions that you and Margie have traveling and your motorhome. I know you've, I think it's quite kind of interesting.
yeah, well, after I retired, see, my dad was part of the reason I retired at the time I did. I was going to work 4 more years, but he was having a problem taking care of the farm and the horses and everything. And so I retired, and with my idea, I was going to spend most of my time out there helping him. Well, then the next year he passed away.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then it took me another year to get the place fixed up and cleaned up and sold and get my sister settled. So then, and we took a couple trips in 1994. One of the trips we went down to the ranch, down to Harold's Ranch, and spent about 5 days there visiting with Red and his wife. Mm-hmm. And Tom Nance. So that was kind of fun. Yeah. And then we were on the road for 3 months. And then we came home, and then that's when Dad passed away. Mm. And then in 96, we went down there again one more time and visited, but the gravel company was taken over. So, and we just visited, I just kept taking these long 3-month trips, basically. And then in 97, when did we do that? Jason moved to Philadelphia, or 96. And 97 was his daughter's first birthday, so we drove the motorhome back there and stayed for several days, a week or so. But I was still working. No, I wasn't working. Getting mixed up on my times. But anyway, it was a great trip. First time we'd been back east. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of funny on the way back. On the way home, we went through Bemidji, Minnesota on the way home with the motorhome. And it was snowing hard in October. And so we dropped down to Interstate 94 and pulled into a Flying J truck stop in Fargo. And there was a big motorhome there from California. And when I opened the door, here's a little old guy in shorts and flip-flops. He says, "Where did you come from that you got snow and ice on your rig?" He didn't want to go there. So, but then, then 99, we had a trailer. Then we went back and spent the whole, 7 months back east, 8 months back east. And when Jason and his family moved back to Oregon, then we spent the time, we moved down to Richard's house, stayed there 3 weeks, toured all around. Then we went down to your brother's campground for a couple nights anyway. I always remember your bicycle ride out in the country, and there was a plantation house there.
Oh, yes.
And I said something about wondering if I'd like to see one of those someday. And you said, well, we just go knock on the door and see if we can get a tour, which is what we did.
It's what we did.
So that was your deal.
I'd forgotten about that. So we were on a bicycle, you say? Is that what we were on?
Yeah, we were on a bicycle ride out in the country.
I'd forgotten. Yeah.
Then we went down to the Outer Banks and stayed there for a week and went and saw where they were moving the Cape Hatteras Lighthouse. Then we worked our way back up to Richards, and you and I spent 4th of July night on the steps of the Capitol for the fireworks and show. And there's a lot, it'd take a long time to tell that whole story.
Right.
And then we went on up to the White Mountains in New Hampshire. Went to Boston. We were in Boston when John Kennedy Jr. was killed. Huh. And Cape Cod. We went on Cape Cod. And we headed back in August for Margie's sister's 70th birthday in Boise, Idaho. and went home.
Uh-huh. What was I going to ask you? Oh yes, you were telling me earlier, and you've mentioned this a few times, and the nice time you have with your retirement buddies from the fire department. Even today, I think you still meet with them, don't you?
Oh, yeah. We have coffee on Monday mornings.
Mhm.
But we used to, there was a group of us, 6 of us, that used to ride motorcycles together.
Uh-huh.
And we took some long, we'd go for 2 weeks at a time.
Wow.
And sometimes after the first week, then we start branching off because, you know, a whole week with the same guys is long enough. But we had some great trips. We went to Black Hills and then down Denver. And I don't think we ever went further east than Denver.
Uh-huh.
But had
And
some
these
great.
are these are the guys that you meet with a lot now?
Some of them are.
Huh.
One of them has passed away, and actually, there's only 2 of us that still ride.
Mm-hmm.
So, and another one left his wife of 40 years and left her a note and said he wanted a divorce and went off and married another lady. We haven't seen him since. That was 15 years ago.
Wow. Oh, that's great. That's great. Well, listen, I think we've had a really good talk today. Just learning all about your past, your family, and your current family, and everything. Thank you so much for your time to do that.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Yeah, it was good fun. So I'm just gonna sign us off now, and we're gonna be posting this on the family blog, and it's be for everybody to share.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, well, thank you so much, and we'll talk later. Okay.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Hey, Donald, how you doing today?
Oh, we're doing fine.
Good, we're back again, huh?
It just started raining.
Uh-oh, really? We have a beautiful day going on right here in Newport, Rhode Island. It's gorgeous. But I think the rain is a good thing for you because of all the forest fires, right?
That's right. It's going to help cool things down.
Yeah,
at least the smoke is gone.
Oh, is it? Oh, that's great. It's great.
Yeah.
Good to hear. Yeah. So anyway, moving on with our interview here, we're going to start talking about Grandpa Ernest, and let's go.
Yeah, in the previous interview, I talked about my folks buying the place after the war in 1946. It was a half acre. We had a garden and chickens and everything, and there was a small barn there. And I don't know the exact details, but we had a cow, and Grandpa Ernest lived with us for a while. And he took care of the cow. That's all I remember about it. And then my sister was born in 47. January 47, and then I never saw. I don't know where he went after that. He wasn't there then. But I do remember your dad coming down when my mom was in the extended bedroom with no heat, and he wired up and with a thermostat on electric heater for her to keep her warm.
Oh, that's right. My father was quite the electrician.
Yeah. So anyway, so then I didn't. You know, I saw Grandpa Ernest, you know, at different places. I don't know where he lived at the time, but then in 1956, well, the place we bought had a cabin on it, a log cabin. And in I think it was 56, my dad remodeled the cabin into a livable space with a bathroom, shower. And Grandpa came and lived with us then. And then he had the stroke, I think in 58, and then went to the state hospital and died in 59. But I was always kind of sad because now I think back on it, I think, gee, you know, nobody really wanted him around. It was kind of sad. Everything he owned was in a suitcase. He just went from one place to the next, one family member to the next. So, but then in 1965, my parents bought the place in Sherwood where we had all the family gatherings. And there was just a shack there, and Uncle Art came out. Arthur, as everybody knows him. I call him Uncle Art. Mm-hmm. And he helped us rebuild the shack into a livable house. Mm-hmm.
Now
And
that
then,
was on a big farm, right?
well, it was 16 acres. Yeah, they built the place into eventually a horse boarding stables.
Hmm.
Well, I forgot, and back when we lived in Multnomah, he used to come and work on his car in our garage. I remember him working on his 55 Ford. I'm not sure what he did to it though. I think it was a timing chain or something.
Tell us something about your farm, because it was a beautiful piece of property. How did that get developed?
Oh, well, Uncle Ralph had a whole bunch to do with that. He hired an earth mover, big earth mover came out and they resculptured the property. I don't know if you remember, but on the east side of the house was a flat field. Well, that used to be a big ditch, a huge. And then he built he terraced it down to where the horse stables were. And then we built the pole barn. And it was pretty interesting because we had the Jeep and my dad made a deal with the next door neighbor and we cut these trees, 6-8 inch trees over at his house. And we drug them over with the Jeep, and then Uncle Ralph showed me and taught me how to do it too. But he shaped them, trimmed them, shaped them all by hand with hand tools. And we didn't use a chainsaw. We had an old chainsaw, but he said it was too much trouble. It was faster to cut them with that big handsaw. But he was a worker. It's hard to keep up with. And,
now you mentioned a Jeep. Now, is this the same Jeep that you sent me pictures of with a lot of the family piled all over that Jeep?
Yes, that's the Jeep.
That's the Jeep.
That's the Jeep. And it had, if you notice in the picture, there's a winch on the front, hand winch on the front of it. Well, Uncle Ralph had us build a A-frame on the front of it and use the winch to lift the poles up in the cross pieces in the pole barn up onto the poles. And that's how we built the roof. So it was quite a deal.
Quite ingenious, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Now there was also a river on your property, I remember.
Yeah, the property was 1 acre wide and 16 acres long. And about at the 14 acre mark down in the floodplain, the Tualatin River went through and went around the other end. It's like on a peninsula. So there was 2 acres over there that weren't accessible to the farm, basically. A couple of times I swam over there, but it was too much bushes, too much brush to even get in there. So we never used it. But one time I drove the Jeep down there on the floodplain, down to there was a cutout for a boat landing, just a dirt. And I drove the Jeep down the boat landing and the brakes went out and it went into the water. I have a picture of it sitting there and all you can see is the steering wheel.
Uh-oh. And how did you get it out? How'd you get it out?
Well, our next door neighbors had a tractor and he came and pulled it out. And it was kind of weird because I just rebuilt the engine on it.
Oh.
And it was running when it went under.
Uh-oh. And then did you rebuild it again?
So, well, no, we pulled it out and I drained the water and oil out of the engine and blew everything out and put new oil in and it started right up and ran for another several years.
You must have done a good job rebuilding it.
Must have, yeah. But then as far as Uncle Ralph, his car had a burned valve and I took the engine all apart and then he wasn't feeling well. So he decided to go home. He took the bus home back to Seattle and then he died.
Wow.
I never did know what was wrong with him. It was and he was only like 62 or 63. It was really sad because he was a neat guy. But moving on, the dynamite and the stumps. We were blowing stumps in the lower field there below the barn. And he was going to teach me how to blow stumps. And the first one I did, I just blew the dirt out. And the stump was still sitting there. The second one I did, I put too much dynamite in. I blew it up in the air and over to the neighbors and came down over their power lines. So that was my, that's how I learned to blow stumps. Let's see. But anyway, so then, we got the horse boarding business going. And in 1969, I helped my dad build this 2-story section on the house. Well, then in 71, the old part that we had built first looked kind of bad. So I don't know if you ever knew Lillian's husband, Uncle Frank.
Yes.
We called him Virgil.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, his cousin was also a builder. And Virgil had passed away, I think, in 69. But his cousin came out and built the lower living room and kitchen section on my dad's house, and my parents' house. So,
tell us a little bit about your boarding of horses, which is a very interesting business. I mean, was it successful, or how many horses did you have? What was that all about?
It was successful. We had a lot of horses. My parents were not good money managers, so they never really made much money on it. But and sometimes the people couldn't afford the board, so they just abandoned the horse. So, and my mom felt bad, so she ended up with horses that people didn't want, and she didn't want to get rid of. I don't remember how many there were. There was total usually around 16 horses there. And we had to haul in feed. We had to haul in the hay for them and all the feed for them. And after I got married and I had my own place up in Silverton in 73 to 76, and I used to bale hay up there. And then I'd sell it to my mom or give it to her. So, but it was pretty fun. And she had a lot of young girls from high school girls came out to learn how to ride. And I think I told in the interview about her when she had her leg amputated. She was in an electric wheelchair, and she'd still go down and teach the kids how to ride and give them verbal instructions and show them what they could do. So
I remember Diana loving horses. I think she did very much.
She did. She was out there. She had her own horse also. And then after my mom got sick and was having problems, my Diana moved back out there and pretty much took care of things. Dad had to feed the horses, but Diana kind of ran the show for them then. But it was a lot of work, that's for sure. Plus just keeping the brush down, keeping the property maintained, and we spent a lot of time plowing around the woods with the Jeep, making trails.
Yeah, actually, I remember some of that.
Yeah.
But I also remember times out on the farm with a dune buggy.
Yeah, I haven't been able to find any pictures of the dune buggy at the farm.
Really?
And I was going to get one out to show you, to see if you remembered if that was the one you were talking about.
Okay.
It had but it was just a motor in the front with the big wheels in the back and 2 seats.
Right. Yeah.
And I have no clue, no recollection of what happened to that dune buggy. I don't know where it went.
But I remember some great, wonderful gatherings on your farm with all the family and cousins.
Oh,
good time. Good time.
It was, yeah. I have a lot of pictures, and most everybody should have the pictures because Barbara took them. And she wrote on the back of them what they were and who was there and the year and the time and everything. So I have a lot of those.
Yeah, I don't know that we have many of those on our blog, so maybe I'll have to track. Maybe Judith might have them, huh?
Oh yeah, she should have them.
I'll ask.
But that was fun times, And the last one I remember, well, yeah, it was in 91. The one in 91, after my mom was gone. We had that last one out there. So, but everybody was there. And then they all started to pass away. So,
It
that
was, it
happens.
was, yeah, it was an interesting time because that was also the time when all of us were getting to the age of, getting married and moving on, and a lot
Mhm.
of things happening. And that's the whole point of this reconnecting with this blog and everything is 50 years have passed since then. So, okay, we got to
Yeah,
catch up.
a lot of, yeah. I was really sad. I went to my one of my firefighter friends' uh, celebration of life last Saturday, and he was only 63. Yeah. And he had so much to do. He was such a great guy. And they just bought a new place after he retired, and there was like 150 people there,
Wow.
and about 100 firemen that he worked with. He worked at the Portland Fire Bureau like my dad. But,
Can you talk a little bit about Arthur? You had mentioned about how your father helped remodel Arthur's motel in Hood River.
oh yeah, I don't remember too much about that, but because that was, I don't know, I was getting in the fire. I was just in the fire department then, and then I got married in '69. So I'm not sure of the dates, but I know that my dad went up there several times and helped him remodel some of the cabins. And I did go once for sure, maybe twice. And Doris was living there too. She managed the place. She and Kathleen lived in one of the cabins, or I guess the main house of the area. And then they had a laundromat too on the property. And then he built an RV park next to it. Way back, he had built an RV park next to their house. Actually, it wasn't an RV park. It was a mobile home park with some RV sites there in the house on Division Street. And growing up, we used to go visit there once in a while with Arthur and Edith and the boys, and Richard always had better toys than I did, so I liked to go there. Same with Lillian and Frank. I used to like to go there because Walt had better toys than I did too. But yeah, and now I drive by that house every once in a while on Division Street, and it's totally, it looks like it's all closed in. There's apartments on one side and the mobile home park on the other side, and they must have taken out the garage or something.
So this is the house you're talking about that Arthur lived in for a while?
Right, in the 50s. Well, actually, I don't know how long, but up to the 50s anyway. I told the story about the chairs that President Kennedy sat in at Arthur and Edith's house. Was that in the previous episode?
I don't recall that one. I don't recall.
Well, they lived over in Eastmoreland after she was in Congress. In 1960, John Kennedy was campaigning for president, came to Portland and stayed at their house. And they had these two tall, like I call them wingback chairs, but I'm not sure if they were actually wingbacks. Anyway, years later, those chairs ended up in my dad's barn and just thrown in there. And then one day I decided, I said, I like to get those chairs, and they're kind of a historic heritage. John Kennedy sat in those chairs. Anyway, so I went to get them, and Dad says, "Oh, I burned those a couple of years ago."
No.
He didn't like old stuff. he burned our dining room table that I grew up with, the chairs and everything. So.
A couple thoughts from you about your experience with Barbara and Judy and David. I know they came out to the farm a lot.
Yeah, Judy and David did, especially David. He was always out driving the Jeep when he was pretty young, actually. But both of them were there. And then Barbara was still working. They'd spend the weekend at least. I'm not sure if they stayed overnight. I don't know that. But and then later on, much later, Barbara and Margie and I used to meet for lunch a lot over at Sweet Tomatoes. It was a soup and salad bar, and David would come sometimes. And I wrote that all down here somewhere.
Yeah, but you had mentioned also that David had family gatherings at some point.
Oh yeah, yeah. He had 2 or 3 at his house that I remember. I remember one for when after Barbara passed away, but before that, even. And that was a lot of fun because he's got a lot of kids of his own.
Right,
and
a lot.
grandkids.
Now he has a great grandchild.
Yeah. And so, and then Judith would come with, I don't think she brought her family from Pennsylvania. And then she moved, I haven't seen her since she moved to Texas, except
Right.
on the video.
Yeah, now Judith, yeah, she moved from Pennsylvania to Texas, I think because her daughter moved there.
Right.
And her daughter now has 7 children, and
Right.
she wanted to be near them. So that's an interesting story. When I get an interview with her, I'll want to hear more about that story.
Yeah. But I run into people who moved to follow their grandchildren, and then they sell their house and move and buy a house near and then the grandchildren and the daughter, or whoever leaves, move somewhere else. I know 2 people that's happened to.
I've heard those stories.
So.
Now, what about Uncle Harold? You said near the end of his life, you were involved with him a bit.
Yeah, I never saw him too much after I went down to the ranch in '64. But after, just when he'd come up for family gatherings, mostly at Hood River. We had several there at Hood River. And I don't think he ever came to the farm. Don't remember. Anyway, Tom Nance, who was his CPA, good friend, golf partner, and he's the one that actually saved the inheritance that we enjoy. Some crooks had gotten hold of Uncle Harold and talked him into including them and as his what, I can't think of the word.
Successor?
Successors, yeah. They had power of attorney on him and everything. It was really weird. And then one day, and a couple of them even moved in with him. And Tom Nance called out there, and this guy answered the phone, and he got suspicious and started investigating it, and ended up changing it all around, getting rid of those guys. In fact, the estate has about a $1.8 million judgment against the 3 crooks, 3 or 4 crooks, but they'll never collect it. Some of them died, some are in prison. One guy who was living in his car last we heard. So, but anyway, Tom Nance got it all straightened out, and then in '91, Harold was in failing health, and so Tom took him to I used to call them nursing homes, but that's not what the proper word now. That's care facilities where they take care of you. Anyway, Uncle Art asked me if I would travel down there to visit with Harold as a kind of representative of the Oregon side of the family. And he paid for the plane tickets. I went down there twice in 1991, November. I think it was both times in December, because I was working at the Beaverton station then. And I'd fly down on a night flight and then spend the day and 2 nights at the house, at Harold's house. That's where I got to know Tom and Red. And I got to explore a little bit, use the pickup. And then I fly back overnight, late in the evening, and arrive in Portland like at 2 or 3 in the morning. And I had my pickup parked at the airport, and I'd just go to the fire station and crawl in and go to bed and sleep and wake up at 7 and go on duty. So.
What do you know about Tom Nance? It's kind of an interesting story you related just now with his relationship with Harold. I mean, wow, that's a true friend, huh?
Yeah, they were friends. I don't know for how long for sure, but Tom Nance, when he was 19 years old, he was flying P-38s at the end of World War II over Italy.
Hmm.
And he trained here in Portland Air Base, at the Portland Air Base, to fly P-38s. But they were really good friends, tennis players and golfers. No, they didn't play golf. Tom Nance played golf.
Mhm.
So, and I got to know him in '64 when I was there. Or did I? No. No, I didn't. I didn't know him until '91.
Hmm.
My brain is kind of going away. Anyway.
A lot of years.
Yeah, a lot of years. So anyway, I got to know him then. There's a picture on my website there of Tom and Uncle Harold and I when Harold was in a wheelchair. But anyway, he took good care of him. You know, and when Harold was still at the ranch, Red Morgan, the foreman took good care of him, helped him out. He went to this special breakfast place, and Red was the hired hand, so he'd drive Uncle Harold to the breakfast place and sit in the car and wait for him. That seemed a little strange to me. It seemed like they'd go in and have breakfast together, but I guess that's the way it's done in Texas. I don't know. Yeah, he was just the hired hand, but he took good care of him until he had to go to the care facility. Anyway, so I went down there and got to know him, visited with Harold for a couple of days each time. And then after he passed away in '92, the lawyers called me, and Johnny Gibson and I flew down to go over the estate, final estate closures. And Johnny was to represent the people in LA area, and I up here. So, and then after that, when I started traveling, Margie and I traveled down there, and we stayed at the ranch for about a week one time in '94 with our motorhome, and visited with Red and his wife. Now her name slips me. Can't think of her name. Anyway, we toured all around the area, and because I was stationed in the Air Force in San Antonio, and I showed Margie all this stuff. Then we went back down in '96 and did it again, and stayed about 4 or 5 days. But part of the process when Johnny and I went back in '92, the lawyers were going to just give Red the boot. He'd been there since 1950. And they were going to just say, okay, sorry, the job's over. And we talked him into letting him move into Harold's house, the big house, and continue his paycheck for taking care of the place. And as that time, the gravel company was taking over the ranch, pretty much. And then they got to the point where there wasn't a whole lot left, but they kept Red there to maintain the property that was still.
So how many years was all that process of Red staying there?
I don't really know. I used to send him Christmas cards, and he once in a while he'd write back, and he got things. He was getting old, and then his wife died, and that's the last time I heard from him. And I don't know anymore. And then after I was there, let's see, in '05, I used to send Christmas cards to Tom Nance also. And then in '05, he had a stroke and was incapacitated. And so I kept sending him cards for about 10 years. And then his wife wrote back to me a couple times. And then finally she wrote back and said he had passed away. And that was probably in 2015 or so. So I don't know whatever happened to Red.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's great that you kept in touch with Tom. I mean, for him to be such a true friend of the family, I mean, unbelievable.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he was a really great guy. Mm-hmm. Enjoyed visiting with him. We had a lot in common because he was an airplane guy and I liked airplanes.
Oh, boy. Speaking of airplanes in your life, so I know the story of not World War II, the Vietnam War, and also I don't know if you mentioned that you took me flying over Mount Hood after it erupted.
I don't think we talked about that before, but not in the previous interview.
Yeah, I think,
But
yeah.
yeah, it was kind of fun because I had bought a new 1981 Honda Goldwing, and I think that's the first time you rode with me.
It
And we
was.
went out and we went out to the airport. No, that wasn't the first time. Because the first time, because I still had my 86 when we went to Seattle. We rode to Seattle. It was cold.
I do remember that. I
You
remember
had
that
my
being very cool.
snowmobile suit on and my electric vest.
Yeah, I remember that.
It was a cold trip. Anyway, oh yeah, and the truck blew a tire and a piece of rubber came over and hit you in the foot.
Yeah. Mhm.
You remember that?
Yes, I do. I do.
Yeah, it was a big chunk of rubber too, about this big.
Yeah, we don't.
Anyway, in the 81, after the mountains blew up and I had this new Goldwing, we rode out and rented an airplane and flew around Mount St. Helens.
Mhm.
That was a fun trip.
Yeah, that was great. And that was about a year after Mount St. Helens erupted, I think, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. So it'd been around 1982 maybe, or thereabouts. I can't remember, did it erupt in 80 or 81?
I don't remember. I do know that it was
Yeah.
barren and it was kind of spooky to me. Everything was
Right.
gray, and I actually some pictures I have in the back somewhere, who knows where, but I do remember it very well.
Yeah, that was quite a sight.
Mhm.
And then after that, I took some other friends for rides over there. If they paid for the airplane, I'd take them up and fly them around it. So,
Now, did
but,
you stop flying after that? When did you actually stop flying?
yeah, my biannual flight review ran out in 1984. And that's the last time I got to fly, other than when I was 50. The guys I went on trips with, they gave me for my 50th birthday a 1-hour flight in an open cockpit biplane.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I went out to do the flight, I took all my credentials with me and showed him the pilot. He says, "Oh, okay, you can sit in the pilot seat," because the pilot sat in the back seat and the instructor or whoever sat in the front seat. And I said, "Okay, are you going to give me instructions over the intercom?" He said, "Well, the intercom doesn't work." So anyway, we went up and he gave me some instructions before and kind of hand signals. And we went up and went for a nice ride and went over to Milano Airport and made 3 takeoffs and landings, and he signed me off as a Stearman pilot. But that's the last time I ever flew as a pilot.
Yeah.
So,
anyway, great story.
actually, that's the last time I ever flew a small plane, went up in a small plane.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And of course, I know your love is still planes and things like that. I know it is.
Yeah, I keep thinking I should go out and have another flight review, but I don't know. It costs a lot of money, and it's not something I really need to do.
Right. I want to share a few things with my family and my mother. I know you were at my house in the 60s when the Seattle World's Fair was going.
Right. Yeah, my girlfriend at the time, I surprised her parents, but they liked me, so, because she was still in high school. She didn't graduate till 63 or 64. Anyway, 63, I guess. Anyway, we just drove up there one day and we stayed at your house in separate rooms and went to the World's Fair and went a couple days there. I don't remember how long for sure. And had a great time with your mom. Is just such a kick to be around. I just like every time I think about her, she just was so full of energy and lots of good things to say. And but
yeah, what's
but
interesting?
Go
ahead.
Well, I remember going there before, because in the 50s, my dad and I went up and helped Uncle Ralph work on a house, and we stayed at your house.
Oh, really? Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he had moved a couple houses into empty lots and then was rebuilding, and refinish them. At the same time, John Gibson and Johnny and Gary were there too, because John was a sheetrock finisher. That was his profession, and so we were all there. I don't know where they stayed. I don't remember if they stayed at your house or not. Huh. But
It's interesting talking to you and learning about all of the contracting background we have in our family.
oh
It's
yeah,
the building and unbelievable, unbelievable.
oh it is. Yeah, because even Uncle Alan, he was a builder and then inspector for the city of Redwood City, as I know. I'm not totally correct on that. And then Grandpa Green built houses, and he and Uncle Harold worked together for a while, but he was too slow for Harold. So Harold said he could build 2 houses when Grandpa could build 1. So I don't know. Harold was a little in love with it. He liked himself, and
Yeah.
so, and then he and Ralph went down to Florida. Somewhere I have it written down. I read a story about all that. Oh, it was in that letter I sent you. That where he traveled around. They built houses in Florida, and then they split up and went Texas. And Harold went to Texas and built houses, and Ralph went and built houses somewhere up on the East Coast, and all around.
Interesting. Yeah. What about Aunt Lucille and your experience with her?
Now, I don't remember too much about seeing her until after I was out of the Air Force. And that summer, I got discharged in July '64, and my buddy's girlfriend was going to school, summer school at UCLA. So I said, well, let's go see if we can stay at my aunt's house for free. I must have known her. I must have met her before, but I don't really remember. And so his name was Arnie. We drove down there, drove overnight, took turns driving, and stayed at Lucille's house for, I don't know, 4 or 5 weeks maybe. And he visited with his girlfriend. And there was another lady I'd met there. Wait a minute. No, that was a different time. Anyway, had a good time with Aunt Lucille. And then we came home, and then in '64, when I drove down to Texas, I went through LA. And on the way down, I stopped in Berkeley because Johnny was going to school at Berkeley, and we had like a 4-day party.
Oh.
There over Halloween. I remember going to UCLA Berkeley football game, and on Halloween, near Halloween in '64. Anyway, and then my friend Phil, who was in the Navy, he was there too. So I picked him up, and he had a whole case of stuff to drink. We spent, I don't know how many days, 4 or 5 days, week. Anyway, I met one of Johnny's lady friends named, now I can't remember her name. Oh, anyway, got to know her a little bit. So then I went on down to LA and stayed at Lucille's house for a few days. And then I went to Texas, and that didn't work out. So I came back to LA and stayed with Lucille through Thanksgiving. And then I went on a date with this friend of Johnny's that I'd met. And how could I forget her name? I have a picture of her. I dropped her off at like 3 o'clock in the morning. I have a picture of her standing next to my car. And that's the only time we ever went out. I asked Johnny about her later, years later. And he said, well, she got married and had 4 kids.
At some point when you were down in LA, I think you saw Linda, didn't you?
Saw who?
Linda, our cousin.
Oh, well, that was much later.
Oh.
I didn't get to know her until around 1982. My buddies and I used to ride down to LA for Honda motorcycle convention. My friend I worked with also owned a Honda shop. That's how I ended up with Gold Wings. Anyway, when was that?
Are we talking about
anyway,
Linda?
Yeah, anyway, so she was living in Valencia there then and I think she was getting divorced or something. Anyway, I got to know her and met her, and then we corresponded a little bit, and then I went back in 96 or 86. She had married David Elder by then, and they'd moved to Fallbrook, not Fallbrook. God, how come I can't remember these names of these places?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't.
Anyway, I stayed at her house for several days and toured around, but it was really cold. And she'd never scraped ice off her windshield before. I had to teach her how to do that.
Did you ever meet her? I'm sorry, did you ever meet her children?
I did once.
No.
Because from then on, I've had more to, I used to stay at her house when I go down and visit. But Fillmore, that's where they lived. And they were building their house over in now I can't remember that place. And they were building the sailboat. And so one day from Fillmore, she rode the motorcycle with me clear down to the ocean to see the sailboat. And then they built their house, and I stayed with her a few times there. And that's where I met her mother and her children. One day they were all there, but I don't have a recollection of it, hardly at all. I just remember that she and David used to, at night, they'd drink espresso before they went to bed and eat chocolates. David had a box of chocolates on the kitchen counter, and every time he walked by, he'd have one. Yeah, they just lived on chocolate and espresso. I said, "How do you sleep?"
You know, they had a website about their business, which was sculpting and art,
Right.
and it's still alive. And I put it on the blog. It's still out there, and it has her name and her picture and everything on it.
Wow, I haven't looked at it for a long time.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting.
But the sailboat they just bought the 36-foot sailboat shell, the basic shell, and then they built the whole interior, and they sculptured all the parts in there, the posts and doorways and everything, and then the same thing with their house. And I have a few pictures of it. It was amazing what they did. And then they had all these sculptured statues out in their front yard. Their place overlooked the Highway 101 freeway. And if you knew where to look, you could look up and see these naked ladies up there on the bank. full size sculptures.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, maybe you'll get some more pictures of those from you at some point.
Yeah, I could send you some pictures of inside the house.
Yeah, because the only picture I have of her, actually, I think, is with you standing next to her. That's it.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's at their new house and that's her studio behind it. So, and as you notice on the door, that's all sculptured too.
Right.
They sculptured everything.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, the guy, he was a fabulous builder. The way he built the house, he built the kind of a turret type with beams that went up, and he told me how he did that with the structure, how he structured it all. I wonder if he's still around.
He is, because his website is live. Otherwise,
okay.
I don't think it would be live.
Yeah.
You know, it's their business together, and
Right.
It's live.
The last time I was there was in 1994. And they did come to the house. Must have been before that, because my dad was still here. They came to my house, and my dad came in, and we all met and sat in the living room and visited for a little bit, and then they left. She had her half-sister lived in Portland, and she occasionally would come up and see her. So,
well, very interesting. Very interesting. Yeah. Southern California relatives.
Yeah, really.
So I hope to get more interviews from our Southern California relatives. But anyway, so I think we've pretty well covered everything you were going to cover. It's been fun.
There was one thing we didn't mention Vera.
Oh, Vera. Okay.
Because Vera lived for a time over in Southeast Portland. I remember going to her, it was an apartment over there. And I remember she just had, the place was just immaculate, had all this fine china and glass storage, furniture inside there. And I remember the story my dad told about her when they were growing up. Remember we went looking for the house over in Stanley Station when you were here last? And,
yes, I remember that.
Well, she was like 20, 21 years old and worked downtown. So she'd go down to catch the trolley into town. And she was Dad said she was a very attractive lady and always dressed in high heels and everything. And she was always late, but the motorman would wait for her. I'm not sure exactly why, but anyway, she was the oldest and had a job that was living at home. And so there was a 4-bedroom house and she got to have a room of her own. And there was no electricity or plumbing in the house. They had a water pump by the kitchen sink. Maybe by the time she was 21, they did, but I don't know.
So now you're saying she's the oldest of the 12 children, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So she had a lot of responsibility then.
Yeah.
Wow.
So she would have been about 13, 14, 15 years old when my dad was born.
Wow.
So, and then your mom came after him, so 2 years after about. But anyway, she married Bill Perring somewhere along the line, and he was a station agent for the Union Pacific Railroad and worked in the faraway places. And I remember my parents liked to travel, so we go visit him. We went up to Condon, I remember, and up to Hermiston and maybe other place where he might have been.
These are places in Oregon, right?
Right, Eastern Oregon. So railroad. But it was fun to go see them. I don't know what they did up there, but and then she passed away in 1958, I think. And then I saw Bill a couple times after that, but that was it. But I think that's,
Yeah, I think we covered everything. We had quite copious notes here, and we covered everything, I believe.
I was thinking about my dad when he worked for Uncle Virgil. He worked at the fire station one day, had 2 days off, and then worked one day, had 2 days off. They were 24-hour shifts. Anyway, he'd go to work for Uncle Virgil, and he'd dig the septic tank hole on the first day off, and he'd dig the whole drain field on the second day. I'm thinking, I've done a little bit of that, but gee, many Christmas, my dad must have, he could dig a big septic tank hole in one day. That was amazing.
Well, I think we have an amazing family.
Oh, for sure. For sure. They were hard workers, all of them.
Yeah, they were, weren't they? Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't think I could keep up with them.
Right. Well, thank you for sharing everything you did on this second interview, which is a supplemental to your first. And
yeah,
I think it'll
I'm
make
sure. Yeah, as I was writing this out, I think, I could write a whole book about all this stuff.
Well, we got a good start.
Yeah. Well, see, the only thing we missed was in Hood River. My dad and I used to go up for lunch later and meet with Doris, was involved in that. Doris and Kathy. And that was always fun.
Yeah, I was in Hood River quite a few times because I remember that motel and the laundromat a lot. I remember that.
Right.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. Anyway, so they closed our favorite restaurant. So then we didn't go anymore.
Oh.
I guess
so
that's it.
Okay, so I think it's time to say goodbye. And thank you for sharing that. And Richard is going to help us by putting this together with your first interview, and it'll be on YouTube very soon.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, thanks a lot. Take care now.
Okay, we'll see you.
Okay, bye-bye.